Hello and welcome. My name is Paul Bazanti and I serve as president of the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant and as your moderator for this event. Our chamber is pleased to be putting on this program in partnership with Rogers TV, and we are happy to bring this debate featuring the candidates running for Ward 3 in the city of Brantford. Our community is facing a number of challenges and issues this time around, and leadership is going to be key to ensuring our future prosperity. I congratulate all our candidates on their continued commitment to their community, and we look forward to an interesting evening. The candidates running in Ward 3 for councillor are Kim Harrison, Greg Martin, Francis McCallum, Dan McCreary, Kaylee Poisson, and Mark St. Angelo. I am joined today as a panelist with Greg Evans from the Chamber of Commerce, and our timer this evening is Andy Straisfeld, a member of our Chamber Advocacy Committee. Each candidate tonight will have 2 minutes to make their opening remarks. The order of speaking was chosen by random draw. The panelists will then alternate posing questions to each candidate, who will have the opportunity to respond to each question and have a 2-minute time limit for each question and response. In the instance of one candidate making reference personally or specifically to another candidate, that candidate will be allowed a 30-second rebuttal. Each candidate will then be allowed a 1-minute closing statement in reverse order from the opening statements. The timekeeper will indicate when the candidates have 15 seconds remaining to speak and when they have reached their maximum time allowed. In the event of a challenge, the decision of the moderator will be final. I would ask that the candidates adhere to the format for this evening's event and conduct themselves with personal and professional decorum throughout the debate. Thank you, and we will begin with the candidates' opening remarks, beginning with Francis McCallum.
Thank you. My name is Francis McCallum. I've been a resident of Brantford since May 2010. My husband and I decided to leave the GTA with our young family to try and pursue his education further, and in doing so we tried to find somewhere affordable our family could live during that time. We considered a few cities, and Brantford is where we chose to call home. We did mean to make that a temporary move and return to the GTA, but after being here for a couple of years, it was somewhere we wanted to stay, somewhere we wanted to grow. Looking at the current situation now in the city, it's not the choice we would have made if we were faced with it today. And I would like to work to make Brantford a place that people can choose to come and grow and live affordably and sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark St. Angelo.
Thank you. My name's Mark St. Angelo, and before I begin, I'd like to thank Rogers and the Chamber for hosting today and all the candidates for being here. An election is your opportunity to reflect and validate that those who have been managing your city are in fact the best people for the job today, that they demonstrate to have the business acumen to help direct the city's $300 million budget appropriately. You will hear that decades of experience is what's in your best interest, that your tax dollars are well looked after, that they care about housing, addiction, and homelessness. But based on outcomes, is this true? The feeling of paying a lot in taxes is real. As a percentage of income, Brantfordians pay 5.2% of their income to municipal burdens, while our neighbors pay as little as 4.4%. That's what experience got us. In 2018, there were approximately 650 names on the housing wait list. Today, it's in the neighborhood of 1,400, more than double. Our challenges need to be funded. But what are the options with taxes already comparatively too high? Do we continue to raise taxes and take on even more debt? Or do we take the responsible approach and begin the process of exploring highest and best use to unlock the value in underperforming assets we already own? Most significant would be the Brantford Municipal Airport. It's 438 acres. It's 438 acres of service land. For context, Buttonville Municipal Airport, and it's 169 acres, sold recently for $386 million. The lack of business acumen to recognize this underperforming asset has likely cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars in the last decade alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Kaylee Poisson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylee Poisson, running for Ward 3. The reason that I am running is you hear over and over again that if you don't like what is happening in the city and what is happening with council, run yourself. So that is exactly what I am doing in an attempt to push our city back into the right direction, to the city that we do love and that we remember growing up, or if you just recently moved here, what it was even 5 years ago to today is unrecognizable. So that is the biggest reason why I am looking to run. I feel that I can provide a different perspective, experience, and just overall care for the community around us, not only for Ward 3 but the city as a whole. I do feel that we need to change our priorities a little bit in order to get to where we want to be. I feel that we have been a little bit sidetracked as far as our priorities and where we have gotten today. I am looking to prioritize our environment, preserving and expanding green space within the city because it is severely lacking compared to other municipalities. Culture and arts is another area that we need to improve upon, as well as our history. So that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Harrison.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Harrison. I'm a lifelong resident and lover of Brantford. At the age of 4, my family moved to Dunstan Street near Wilkes Park. Dunstan Street at that time was a 2-lane tar and chip roadway. Growth? Yes, I've witnessed tremendous growth and still have my finger on the pulse of the city. Early in my career, I was introduced to more detailed accounting and balancing of ledgers. 6 months on the job, I was asked to balance the GL, and it took me less than 30 minutes to learn that cash can create greed. A staff member was fired after my findings were made known, and my upbringing and as an honest and integritous individual paid off. I understand both business and personal taxation along with budgets. I've also managed up to 48 staff in my past. To the best of my memory, council has not had a member with financial background ever. Numbers and people are my thing, and I am incorruptible. My decision to run for council is a sincere attempt to bring honesty and integrity back to the table. Collusion on council and lack of community engagement is rampant. This must stop. I also hope to create cost-cutting measures to stop the overspending of your tax dollars. We hire quality staff at large income levels, and I personally feel that utilizing these skilled individuals could save a lot of tax money. Ward 3 is where I grew up, and Ward 3 will be my priority. Transportation issues, bike lane faux pas, speeding, and lack of policing are concerns I have regularly heard at the doors. When I'm elected, I plan to be the voice for Ward 3 residents and continue to ensure that Ward 3 grows in a safe and healthy manner for all involved. I'm approachable, friendly, a problem solver, and someone that wants to find positive solution. I'm asking you now for your support to make Brantford better. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan McCreary.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, folks. My name's Dan McCreary. I'm your Ward 3 City Councilor since 2003. The job I do for you is twofold. First of all, I look after what happens in our neighborhoods, and secondly, I represent your interests at City Hall and at Municipal Committee. Serving you has always been my primary concern. And as I go door to door again for the 5th or 6th time, I just want to say how grateful I am for your support, for your respect, and for your friendship. It's always refreshing to see that and always energizes me. But we don't just connect, excuse me, we don't just connect at election time. We have an ongoing dialogue. Monthly, we put out a newsletter and tell you what's going on in the community, about community events, and hear back from you some really great ideas, your concerns, your suggestions. And so together we get the potholes fixed, the sidewalks fixed, we get the trees pruned. And I like to think because of your interaction, Councillor Martin and I help to make our neighborhoods a little bit better places to live and raise our families. Second part of the job is looking after your interests at City Hall and on committees. And I'd like to think that in my time on council, I've demonstrated some pretty strong, sensible leadership. That carries on and will carry on for the next 4 years if you'll trust me with that portfolio again. We've got a lot of difficult things on our agenda. One needs only take a look at the forecast financially for next year to see there's a lot of work to be done here, and work that needs to be done by experienced hands, not folks with axes to grind, not keyboard warriors. We've got a time that we have to devote to making some serious decisions going forward. And I think you and I agree on the priorities before us. We have to properly fund our fire and ambulance services. We got to continue to provide decent, affordable housing for people in a bad way. We've got to provide the funding to police, not just to deal with the murders and the guns, but also the noisy mufflers. So let me say that I look forward to continuing in your service for another 4 years. And on October 24th, or sooner, if you're an early voter, come on out and cast your ballot for me, Dan McCreary, your Ward 3 City Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Greg Martin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Chamber and Rogers for putting on this event. My name is Greg Martin. I'm seeking to be re-elected as a councillor for Ward 3 this October. As a resident of Ward 3, born and raised in Brantford, I have witnessed the city's growth and change over a number of decades. While the city has grown and prospered in many ways, we still have challenges ahead. With boundary expansion, maintenance and growth and infrastructure needs, balanced development of residential, industrial, and commercial sectors, and a long-term plan for social housing and community safety. As your Ward 3 councillor, I have worked with commitment to addressing constituent issues for individuals and groups of concerned citizens. Whether meeting at a constituent's home, local coffee shop, city hall, taking phone calls, emails, or having a ward meeting to address an issue, I have always strived to be proactive voice in resolving your concerns. The city is a corporation, and the councillors are its board of directors. We are responsible for managing the investment made by people of Brantford with their property taxes and service fees, and I take that responsibility seriously. We need to elect people with both a good set of skills and related experience to work on council on your behalf. I hope that my record of accountability and service to the residents of Ward 3 and the City of Brantford over my 18 years of elected office makes me, Greg Martin, someone you can have confidence in voting for this October to continue representing your interest at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, once again. And we will begin with this evening's first question. Greg.
Candidates, the City of Brantford is an age-friendly community, and you as candidates have been provided with information to assist you in running campaigns that are age-friendly. What additional measures should the city take to provide safe, adequate, and dignified care for older adults and their informal caregivers? And what more can the city do to help our seniors age in place and concurrently support our youth to become leaders in an age-friendly community?
And we'll begin with you, Mr. St. Angelo.
You touched on aging in place. And when you're visiting doors and you're talking to seniors, it becomes very evident how vulnerable they are becoming, and that they soon will need serious property tax relief to stay in their homes. Even after the Ontario Seniors Home Ownership Property Tax Grant, which is $500, that still leaves a senior, a low-income senior, with $2,500 to $3,000 worth of tax obligation. That money is meaningful enough to keep them in their home. And we should explore every option to do that, because if we can keep them in their home, we save money in the end. And that should be a focus of ours.
Thank you. Ms. Poisson.
I will echo Mark's comments in regards to seniors being growingly and increasingly vulnerable financially in today's market. We are seeing exponential increase in property taxes, not only property taxes for those that own their home, but for renters as well. And seniors are increasingly renting properties, but we are seeing the market push them out through sales of rental properties, through competing with other younger, higher income families, and they are left with nowhere to go. So we are in serious need to think of a solution for them for that relief. And we also have to prioritize resources for them because they don't have the assistance or knowledge of where to find assistance. Many of them are not accessible through the internet or Google and stuff like that, so they need more personable resources to find ways to help them. In the aspect of promoting youth to become leaders, we again need to focus on programs to build their confidence and their interests specifically for those directions of leadership. And that's through recreational activities or other programs. So that needs to be a focus as well.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. When I was out knocking on doors, not only do we know about the fact that seniors on a fixed income are struggling financially, I also met a number of individuals that are caring for their loved ones at home. As we all age, this gets harder and harder to do. I've heard on a number of occasions that the assistance in caring for their loved one is basically non-existent. I get it that there's problems in PSW and healthcare in maintaining and keeping good staff available, but making these services available to help the stronger of the two that are aging is vital, in my opinion. No one really wants to leave their home that they've lived in and loved for a very long time, yet if the assistance isn't there, then potentially they're looking at a nursing home environment. We all know what they looked like during the pandemic, and the staffing issues are getting worse at that level. As far as the youth, I would love to see individuals going out to the schools and engaging. We often did that within the banking system to help them get on the right path, make sure they follow a proper education path, and show them that there's good in helping and mentoring even youngers. That's something that I often feel is one of my strengths, and talking to people as far as that goes. So again, I'd like to reiterate financial help at home, and bringing the youth into engagement for a stronger future. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary.
Paul, thanks. Well, I want to just correct something that was said earlier. The municipality has no control over establishing tax classes that would benefit folks of a certain age or even of a residence type. That's solely the responsibility of the province, and we've had discussions in the past about getting a tax break for a class for condo owners who receive far heavier tax bill compared to the services that they receive. That's something we can take up with the province of Ontario, but it's not something we can do. So going way back, in 2015, the World Health Organization said, "Congratulations, Brantford, you're an age-friendly community." And we have strived every year to improve upon how we provide services and a bucket of things for seniors who, in this community, maybe are not as well off as they are in some other communities. And I got to say, so we do it every day in what we do. I had a constituent that called me a couple of weeks ago, and she asked me about getting a bench put into Briar Park, and so we've got that underway. But to come back to our 2015 recognition, we have a plan that we update every single year. I think it came back to us maybe in the fall, our Age-Friendly Communities Update Plan. And what it talks about, excuse me, is not just the physical things like providing bus stops and shelters, but also providing inclusion for seniors so they can learn to operate an iPad, so they can be included in recreational opportunities, right? Because too often we tend to look at only kids as being recipients of rec. And we do a pretty good job of that down at the senior center downtown. So yeah, we've done an awful lot of stuff. There's an awful lot more to go. The categories, I think, if I can put my finger on it, yeah, the categories that we follow and review every year are outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, housing, social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication, information, and community and health services. So we do really well here, but to reiterate, we have a long way to go, and that's an annual review and a nose to the grindstone thing that the city of Brantford is determined to do better with.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. This is an issue that I'm dealing with right now. Is my mother is in the hospital, and we don't know what supports are going to be available when she is ready to be released from the hospital. We're hopeful that we can get home care for her and have her go back to her apartment. Unfortunately, home care is very difficult to get and very limited, so we're not sure if that's going to be adequate or not. So one of the things we need to do is lobby the provincial government to increase spending on home care so that seniors can stay in their own home longer, which saves money in the long run. One of the things that we have at the city is a Snow Buddies program. And what that does is it pairs students with seniors to shovel their sidewalks or perhaps cut their grass. The students get volunteer hours and the seniors get helped out. Unfortunately, there isn't a big uptake on that program, and one of the things we need to do is get into the schools more and promote the program and encourage students to help look after seniors in their neighborhood. That would go a long way to helping seniors stay in their homes. So this is a serious issue, and it's one that, as Councillor McCurry has said, that we take very seriously and we look at every year. We have extensive trails and transit service that is senior friendly with our low floor buses, with the ramps that fold out as well for seniors that have mobility devices so that they can use the transit system as well. Not all transit systems offer that, but it's something that we're proud of in Brantford, and it's been a big help to seniors that need transit, because once you get to be a certain age, you have to give up your vehicle. And it's unfortunate because that represents mobility and freedom to most people in a community like ours. And it's something that by improving our transit, we allow seniors to continue to get around in the way they want to on their own. So it's a work in progress, something that we work on every year, and look forward to supporting whatever initiatives come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McCallum.
So looking at different sections of our population on an age-based way that need more support, we've got our seniors and we've got our youth, and a lot of us as a working population are sort of sandwiched in between our aging parents and our young children and our growing children who are looking at what will be affordable and sustainable for them moving forward. I think part of what we need to focus on is how are these developments we're going to be seeing over the next decade in the north parts of our city, how are they going to be designed to make sure that all of the members of our community are integrated within the community, and that we're not sort of creating small pockets of impoverished areas and small pockets where we've got a lot of seniors who need more support and integration in the community, and sort of trying to find ways to drive that community interaction. More programs pushing youth into roles with mentors where they can sort of start to see what the future holds for them as far as the workplace. We've got a lot of knowledge amongst our seniors, and finding ways to disseminate that and take advantage of it for our youth would be something very important in making Brantford more age-friendly to me, as well as looking at more active opportunities. I think a bench in the park sounds like a great idea, but there are lots of ways we could integrate more active options for our seniors and the community as a whole into our parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the subject of transportation. The signature advocacy priority of the Chamber throughout its history is the improvement of transportation infrastructure in our region. What key infrastructure projects have you led or will you commit to leading as a councillor in Ward 3? And we'll begin this question with Ms. Poisson.
As far as my experience with transportation infrastructure, that is not my forte. But given my perspective with the way things that have been done over essentially the last decade, I would say, we're seeing our roads deteriorating, we're seeing the potholes, we're seeing the sidewalks lifting up, and it seems to take an extremely long amount of time to resolve those issues. I am very happy to see the downtown improvement project starting and being underway. I think that will be a great aspect as far as improving the infrastructure for downtown to get it to the level of the 21st century in order to move to improve the downtown core. I would love to see more thought process into alternate construction practices or materials used that maybe have a longer longevity, because you seem to pave a road and then 5 years later it has cracks and potholes and stuff like that. So I feel that we need to look at a bigger picture instead of a Band-Aid solution to see if we can improve our infrastructure for longer term than what we've seen in the past.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Yes, I did speak briefly about transportation in my opening address. The word from the people at the door in Ward 3 is that there simply isn't enough being done about speeding and therefore the safety of all of the people, including the children. Speed bumps installed create other issues. People indeed slow down to go over them and then they speed up rather fast and gun their vehicles. Bicycle paths, the changes, although warranted and wanted, I believe, haven't been done with the greatest of forethought, in my opinion. There are bicycle paths to nowhere. For example, on Powerline Road, there's a bike path leading east towards Wayne Gretzky Parkway from King George Road, but it stops abruptly because there's a drainage ditch on the shoulder. This makes no sense to me. If we weren't going to continue the whole path in a respectable manner or usable manner, I don't know why we wasted the money in that regard. The way that they're set up right now on Memorial Drive will also create major traffic problems once the new development begins on the north side of Powerline, in my opinion. A 4-lane road that potentially will be needed as a major arterial road has now been reduced to 2 lanes. All we needed to do was to look at other communities in the area. Hamilton did it right, in my opinion, on Cannon Street. Google it and see for yourselves. And thank you to my potential constituent for pointing this out to me. I attended 2 different Ward 3 meetings on this topic as well. One was really not a meeting, sort of picture placards for you to look at, and no council members were even present. When we think about forward thinking and planning, we must take a proactive approach versus a knee-jerk reaction and be painting the lines yet again. One final street is Park Road North. What's that even all about? I don't get it. Thanks.
Thank you. I will allow the sitting councillors to rebut your comment. So, Mr. McCreary, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds on this question. And then
Well,
Mr.
I
Martin
have
will
no
give
need
you-
to rebut. I can't say that Ms. Harrison is not accurate with respect to some of her observations. And in fact, it's really driven Councillor Martin and I crazy trying to deal with some of these things that have been implemented without proper consultation, without proper interaction with the ward councillors. So we've ended up doing a second iteration of Memorial Drive from end to end. My favorite bit was where they had the center turn lane arrows pointed in the wrong direction. An absolute embarrassment. Councillor Martin and I brought a resolution to council to redo it. We had the proper consultation. And lo and behold, we got it all right except for the one block stretch, which had to be redone a third time, and finally is the way that the councillors and the residents saw fit. And that's how it should have happened from the beginning, was that kind of on-the-street discussion with three folks that lived on that stretch of the street that gave us their time and their expertise and their observations, and we got it done right. North Park Street, we were blessed there because we put the initial lining on the rough coat of asphalt. We had a year in which to observe patterns. We came back, and when we redid the top coat, we got it right that time. So, you know, there are a lot of things on our agenda. Park Road North, another sore point for Councillor Martin and I. We're on that one as well, but it's Yogi Berra said it's deja vu all over again, I guess, and that's what we face sometimes. But going forward, Councillor Martin and I are planning to push for the completion of the Power Line Trail. And thank you for your comment on that, because I had forgotten that I would have brought that up today. That's going to connect all the way over to Gretzky eventually. And we are blessed with the opportunity, with a fresh palette north of Power Line in the annex, to begin to design a transportation system which incorporates active transportation from the get-go, that doesn't involve a bunch of sticks and lines and driving people crazy on those winter days when you don't know where to drive. So we've got an opportunity to do that correctly, and Councillor Martin and I are going to be instrumental in being able to participate in that process so that we don't end up with some of the same type of questionable decisions that have led to some of the things we've had to take action on this last year or two.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, you can have 2 minutes and 30 seconds as well.
Thank you. Well, it's no secret I've been an advocate for the airport. It's been suggested that we need to look at selling the airport. Well, one of the things you have to realize is on title, if that facility stops being an airport, the land reverts to the federal government for $1. Even if we can get that overturned, get that changed, you got to keep in mind that agricultural land in the county is nowhere near as valuable as industrial land in the GTA. So the expectations of what that property is going to sell for are greatly inflated. The airport is a very useful economic development tool, and there's 34 companies that were using the airport pre-COVID. Some of the names you'll recognize is Procter & Gamble, Ferrero, Orange, and Tiger Cat Industries. So the other thing that we have to consider is that there's 2 active flight schools operating at Brantford Airport, training future pilots. One of the problems we have right now is a shortage of pilots, which is part of the problem for the delays at Toronto Pearson. By training additional pilots, we can help to alleviate that problem. The airport's also utilized by the W. Ross Macdonald and the E.C. Drury schools to get their students from far-off locations home for weekends and back again. So without the airport, we lose that opportunity. The airport's also used as a base by the Ministry of Natural Resources for dropping rabies bait to help control rabies in the entire area. That's something that's vital to this area, and it would mean they wouldn't be able to drop as many bait packets if they had to travel further to reload and refuel. Also, we have Conestoga at the airport that has running 3 programs out there. As was mentioned, we need longevity in our roads. That's something I've been pushing since I got on council. We need to look at doing more concrete on roads where they're not going to be subject to service cuts in order to connect servicing. And the ideal location for that would have been the Gretzky Parkway north of Dunstan. There's serious problems with the pavement in that area, and it should have been done in cement in the first place instead of asphalt done several times. And the idea of Park Road North, that's something that the Ward 4 councillors were consulted on, but not the Ward 3, even though it's a road that is the boundary between the two.
Thank you. Before we go to Mrs. McCallum, we'll go to Mark here, and I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to Mr. Martin's comments about the airport.
Sure. What I'm suggesting is that we determine what the highest and best use is for the airport. No one said sell it. It's certainly an option. But we don't need to own an airport to benefit from 3 of them and to build a strategy to service more than 34 companies, 300 companies with that site. Will it fetch $386 million? Maybe, maybe not. But we need to find out in order to look after the best interest of these constituents in our city. And ignoring it and pretending it's not there.
Thank you. Ms. McCallum, over to you.
So there's obviously an operational need to continue spending money on our roads as they are to maintain and improve them. But I think when it comes to our capital expenditures, we need to have a much greater focus on mass transit, high-speed transit, and active transit. Finding ways to separate vehicular traffic from people on foot and on bikes as we develop in the north is going to be important. You know, if we can separate those tracks, we won't need to worry as much about collisions, and we'll be able to, you know, move forward more on the vision zero goals. Yeah, continuing to focus on single vehicles moving throughout the city is just short-sighted. We should be looking at where we want to see things in 20 and 30 years. Part of choosing Brantford as a place to stay long-term was the fact that we are just within an arm's reach of a lot of places, a lot of employment, and a lot of opportunities. We have Woodstock and London, Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, Hamilton, Burlington. We've got Simcoe and areas to the south. But there are not easy ways to connect between them. And if we're going to have more people living and working in Brantford, you know, we're going to have to find more ways to move people in between these places and do it more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Now back to you, Mr. St. Angelo,
Sure.
on the original question about key infrastructure projects you would lead.
Transportation infrastructure is really an interesting question because it's going to involve different levels of government. Provincial, of course, municipal, and in some cases, federal funds. What I find difficult in Brantford is understanding the strategy, the transportation strategy. And it seems to be absent at many different levels. As an example, I went to both active transportation community meetings. There was only one other councillor candidate there and a handful of citizens. So I had an opportunity to spend time with city staff. And as we're looking at this giant active transportation map, I posed the question, can you explain the strategy of linking education, shopping, and so on through active transportation? What's the strategy to link all of those key elements? There wasn't one. There were a lot of tactics, but there was not an overall connectivity strategy. And we will find that almost at every touch point where strategy is confused for tactics. One of the things that comes up at the door when you're talking about public transportation, especially with seniors, I asked a lady if she would be more willing to take public transit if there was a cash fare for seniors, because she only takes a handful of rides a month. And she said she would. But she said there's one problem. I need to take a cab to the bus stop on the days I do my shopping, because if I was to try and walk to that bus stop, I wouldn't be able to do my groceries. So when constituents tell you things like that, it's time to take a step back and reevaluate if we're actually servicing the community that we're intended to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. Greg.
As the voice of our members and as the largest business organization in the area, the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant frequently hears about the cost of doing business in the community. And we appreciate the efforts of City Council over the years to maintain a focus on one of our signature policies, tax ratio fairness between residential, commercial, and industrial tax ratios. In a post-COVID 2023, what do you see being the biggest challenges to developing the 2023 municipal budget?
And we'll throw it over to you, Ms. Harrison.
Okay, being new to this whole process, I don't have a lot of information on past happenings. However, I do believe that the city does need money to operate, police, fire, education, infrastructure, etc. When finance are wasted on consulting costs and expensive lawsuits launched against 6 individuals peacefully protesting against the sale of a property, this is a waste of taxpayers' dollars. We need to ask ourselves, is this the way we want our money to be spent, or would we rather use it doing all the things that are imperative? So as far as, again, we'll even just go into the roads. Are we spending the money on the right people that we're choosing to do the job? There once was a time that roads didn't have to be repaved for years and years and years. Who's giving the contract to what company? And are we checking on making sure that the depth is appropriate for the use of the roadway? I like the idea of the concrete for sure. Another heavy tax burden happens to arise when developers are allowed to pay lower taxes on certain purchases. They'll then come back and ask for the portion that's supposed to be commercial development to be then set up as residential, and this creates a shortfall in our tax dollars. We need to make sure that this isn't done on a regular basis. There will be exceptions, I'm sure. However, it just can't be done on all the time. If we could cut costs on these items and many more, property taxes might actually be able to be lowered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary, over to you.
I'm glad I wrote down the question. So let me say this. First of all, it's a tough year coming up. We've got a report that comes before us later this month. We're looking at 4.79%, and that's after the assessment from new businesses, new homes. So what that means to the average homeowner is $161. And for those of you living in the third ward, you're not the average homeowner. You're well above the average homeowner. So we've got some work to do. And that's why experience counts, okay? Because you can't come into this cold and expect to get a handle on it. Now, you folks, some of you at the Chamber, I don't think you've been around as long as I have. Thinking way back to when we brought forward the tax fairness, I think it was in 2015, I guess. We were in the vicinity of 1.8 to 2.2 ratios between commercial, industrial, and residential. And the province at that time had said that the ideal is about 1.1. So with much difficulty, we managed to get past council our plan, the Chamber's plan, really to implement the tax fairness, which really helps us to attract new business, which helps to attract new jobs, and which nowadays we're seeing the dividends from that, because I think in the last, let me just see, I wrote that down. Over the last 6 years, we avoided increases of 2.7 on commercial, 6.2 on industrial, and 7% tax increases on multi-residential. But it's always the first place council goes in a tough budget year. We'll always revisit the tax fairness and you know, maybe tinker with it a little bit or give it a year's hiatus. But I think for Chamber and business community should recognize that council has an interest in making sure that this is a business-friendly community. We do everything we can with respect to, excuse me, with respect to tax fairness, the Economic Recovery Task Force that we did, and the Red Tape Committee as well. So we're doing our best to make sure we're good for business.
Thank you, Mr. McCreary. I'll refrain from giving myself a 30-second rebuttal. Over to you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the Chamber for bringing that forward. I was a supporter of that program from when it was first introduced, and part of the reason why it was pointed out that at over 3 times multiplier for industrial, we were the second highest community for having the multiplier for industrial. I think Hamilton was the only one that was higher than us. Since then, we've got that down considerably, as Councillor McCreary has indicated, for industrial, commercial, and for multifamily. One of the things that we're faced with is we don't have a consistent multifamily rate because the province has forced us to do new multifamily at a multiplier of 1. So we have 2 different multifamily ratios, and part of my drive with the tax fairness is to get that so that they're the same, because property taxes are what goes into some of the calculation for what rents are charged, and we all know rents are far too high in this community right now. So that's something that we can do to help with the rent in some of the older buildings, is to get that multiplier down. It will take time. It's something that can't just be implemented all at once. The original plan was a 10-year plan, and we'd be there by now if we'd stuck with it, but unfortunately That's one of the first things that some councillors will go to in order to ease the tax burden. But it's something that has been moving in the right direction, and I support it going in that direction every year, and I hope to see it move even further. I think we've set a target of 1.8 for multipliers for industrial and commercial. And as I said, we need to get the multifamily down to 1 so that we have one consistent rate for multifamily residences. It's important to have a look at the budget every year. I know I've gone in and through the line by line and found things. And before Councillor McCurry got on council, there were times I couldn't even get a seconder for obvious waste in the budget. But things are getting a little better. We're getting a lot of the waste cut out of it and moving along in the right direction.
Thank you. Ms. McCallum.
So to touch on what Mr. Martin said there, looking at what is driving the increase in the rents people are paying locally, it's really not our property tax rates. In some cases, the cost of properties is driving an increase for new landlords, but for existing landlords, without having to make large capital increases in their facilities, they've been able to raise rents substantially, making it a less affordable place for all of us to live. I think we need to look at ways to address that. Understanding we don't have full control over how these rates are broken up. But the idea of lobbying to look at an owner-occupied multi-unit being regarded differently as something that someone's got purely for profit, I think would be good ways to help, regulate the market in the ways we can. When it comes to our industrial tax rates, when it comes to our commercial tax rates, our businesses are having trouble finding people to fill the jobs. I don't think that, tax rates that are benefiting growth in those areas is the most effective way to create a city that can be a community we can all live and work in. Finding ways to, make the city more affordable for its residents versus its businesses would be a priority for me.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo, on challenges facing a new budget in 2023.
Excuse me, I think when you're looking forward and you look at the residential taxes like we talked earlier, where Brantford residents are paying 5.2% of their income to municipal burdens. That's what they understand. They understand how much of their money they have to pay out. They don't understand fees and roll rates, but they understand how much I have and how much I'm putting out. The balance for council will be keeping the municipal burden where it is or lower, and it's already too high as we've talked about, while trying to be fair to business and attracting new business. So basically we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. How long are we going to be able to do that? That's a struggle that every municipality has. We actually have an asset that we can monetize to help offset the burdens that have been put on us for decades. This didn't happen overnight. It happened over decades. And the only way we're going to be able to figure this out is to start the leverage and unlock the value in assets we already have, so that we don't have to continue to raise taxes and take on debt. Nobody wants that. Do the responsible thing, find ways to unlock value in things we already own to offset the burdens that we have. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Poisson.
When the topic of taxes comes up to the public, the only thing that you hear is that I am paying astronomical amount of money for what? What do I receive in return for those taxes? And it is seeming that we're paying more and more and more and receiving less. You see around you, what does the city offer for your taxes? The infrastructure is crumbling. The public recreation resources are diminishing, not there. Outdoor public spaces are diminishing as well. So I think that there needs to be a complete overhaul in the prioritization of the taxes that are being paid to the city. Because with a budget of over $300 million, I feel that there is enough money to give the people what they need and what they desire for their taxes. I think that there is room to reprioritize expenditures and funding through consultation with the public to see where their priorities are. I feel that in regards to spending and the budget, there are aspects like was stated before, like litigation costs have been upwards of $10 million over the last decade. And we also have consulting fees where the ability of staff can probably cover those projects, as well as bids and tenders being utilized more appropriately.
Thank you. The Downtown Improvement Task Force and the Downtown Community Improvement Plan are essential to the ongoing revitalization of downtown Brantford. That's not a question. However, when underground infrastructure renewal along Colburn and Dalhousie Street begin, the downtown will become to be incredibly difficult to navigate by vehicle and by foot, and it will create tremendous challenges for businesses, as experienced by dozens of other municipalities who have recently undertaken similar necessary projects. Notwithstanding the necessity of the project, what strategies would you support to minimize the impact on business and the public sector services during this very essential work? And we'll start with you, Mr. McCreary.
Well, thank you very much. Well, if I recollect, the project is somewhere between 2 and 5 years in duration. It involves the complete removal and restoration of underground water and sewer, as well as the replacement of above-ground services, sidewalks, parking, with something which is more modern and which reflects things you see in other communities. A greater interaction between folks and their environment, the ability to cycle downtown and park downtown and have sidewalk cafes. And it's a thing for downtown Brantford that's long overdue. And I think back to what happened about 30 years ago when the brain trust of the day decided that if only we put in some pink interlock sidewalks and some cheesy lights that are more at home in Boston, Massachusetts than in downtown Brantford, and put in a few laybys, they will come. And of course they didn't. And we made some poor choices with respect to materials. We probably shouldn't have done that work then because it involved significant expense, where now it has to be completely redone. But I'll tell you what the city of Brantford has done, and we learn lessons, okay? I mean, a lot of people like to throw stones at us from the outside, although some of them do live in glass houses. The lesson that we've learned is with respect to the King George Road underground project and the St. Paul Ave underground project. And what we've got here is a business community that has to continue to thrive, or at least struggle through the period of the construction. So we gave instruction, I think it was last month at City Council, for our staff to begin the dialogue immediately with the Downtown Business Association, the BIA, with the downtown merchants, and to begin to establish the protocols, the scheduling, and the interaction that's going to be so necessary when that work actually does start. Then there'll be no surprises, and hopefully we'll get through that and everybody will come out the other end alive.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that it's a needed project, and it absolutely is. Some of the underground infrastructure is over 100 years old. So the fact that that wasn't addressed 30 years ago when the work that Councilor McCreary was talking about was done, it's unfortunate. It means it's going to be a big project, a multi-year project, and staff are working on phasing for that project. They're going to do things in stages in such a way that will allow businesses to hopefully continue to thrive. And it's something that they'll work closely with businesses so that when they're doing utility cutovers. They'll do it hopefully when businesses are closed, so they won't be impacted by loss of water or loss of hydro for a number of hours. And staff are very keen on getting that right, and they're starting the consultations with all the stakeholders in the area. And as Councillor McCurry said, we're dealing with the surface as well. So we're going to get rid of the interlocking brick that poses trip hazard, especially for seniors in a walker or using a cane, that kind of thing. And it'll make the downtown more age-friendly, and it'll help with hopefully in the future, it'll help with the businesses as it allows people to find parking spots easier and get into local businesses. So unfortunately, it's going to be several years of pain. We're doing everything we can to minimize that pain, but it's something that needs to be done. Hopefully the new infrastructure will last 100 years and we won't have to look at a project like this for 100 years or more, because modern materials are that much better. So it's a once in a lifetime rebuild of the downtown infrastructure that unfortunately has to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCallum.
Thank you. So obviously the infrastructure improvements need to move forward. We need to take steps to make our downtown somewhere that people want to spend more time. It's important if we're going to have thriving businesses downtown. Driving art and culture and driving a stronger sense of community for the city as a whole downtown is important in getting that done, and being able to redo the cityscape and have that happen is fantastic and will be great for the city. But if we're not looking more comprehensively at what's going on downtown and making sure that we're creating infrastructure to support the needs of the people who are spending their time downtown, it's not going to get us very far.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo.
The infrastructure problem is something that's obviously unavoidable. And if you've lived in other municipalities where they've had to do water and sewer upgrades, it is a multi-year project. I've lived in Toronto, and well, that's gone on around me, and it's not fun. In regards to the businesses in the downtown core, there are many best practices available where municipalities do work in stages. They work around the retailer's seasonality. So for example, if it's Christmas time, it's going to be the least amount of pain as possible so that shoppers can still get down there. The problem that I have with the downtown core is that, again, and this is coming from someone who spoke to me at the door, they said, why don't they stop putting lipstick on it and do it right? Spend $200 million and do it right. I'm not talking about the water and sewer. I'm talking about what it's supposed to be. And I struggle with what the strategy and plan is for the downtown core. What do you want it to be? Do you want it to be an anchor of activity, of shopping and dining, recreation, arts? That's what it should be. But I think before we get too excited about taking out cobblestone and putting in smooth sidewalks, let's really understand what we're actually doing there and do it right with purpose so that we can look at it and be proud of it and not wonder every 5 or 10 years, what are we doing? That's where the focus should be. Thank you.
Ms. Poisson.
When it comes to the downtown improvement project, the thing that comes to mind that we need to prioritize is a plan before we put shovels in the ground. There needs to be an appropriate plan for the timeline if it's going to be up to 5 years before completion. We have to consider the residents and the businesses that are down there. Because we just went through a 2-year pandemic, businesses are still trying to dig themselves out financially from that. So if we go and affect them again and their potential for revenue, we need to consider how we can assist to get them through that project. Another alternate thing that I feel needs to happen is an education campaign for the residents and vehicles and traffic and commuters to navigate around that area. the potential of using alternate routes like ICOM Drive, the light at the intersection of Clarence and ICOM. If there is an overload of traffic there, it's going to be a nightmare. So we have to navigate a education campaign for traffic as well, especially if the project is going to be that long. Another aspect of it is, again, we have to consult with the community because that is who we represent. The residents, the businesses, the industries that call our city home. We have to be thinking about them and we have to plan around them on these projects. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
I was downtown this afternoon, actually, this morning, and really did appreciate the fact that those interlocking bricks are no longer there. And I don't use a walker. However, I agree with everything here. It's vital. It must be done. We need to figure out a way to have it completed in the least painful way possible. We've already lost some pretty important and long-term businesses from the core with due to the inaction in moving changing the location for our seriously deprived individuals, homeless, addicted. It was also issues about garbage and what have you. So with a proper thought out plan, it can be done very painlessly. And it needs to be done properly. I agree with you, Mark, absolutely. There's no sense completing something haphazardly with potentially needing to make changes in the future. You know, let's talk to the community, ask them what will help. Should we make Colburn or Dalhousie at various times two-way streets, for example, work on one side versus one street versus the other? We really need to get the community involved, the residents as well that will be affected, and do it smart.
Thank you. We've heard from a couple of councillors today on the subject of the airport, but let's dive into deeper detail. Greg?
The airport is an interesting municipal asset. It's located in the county. It's managed by the Airport Commission for the city. And there are a number of businesses and educational groups that rely on each other and on airport operations to serve the region. So how can the city support businesses and educational groups that use the airport while capitalizing on opportunities available with the site? And do you support the airport as an economic development opportunity?
And we'll start with you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, Conestoga has 3 programs out there. One of them is heavy machinery. And one of the things we're looking at on the Airport Commission is getting them to utilize the students and help with some of the basic infrastructure needs at the airport. One of the things that we can look at is removing the inner runways that are no longer used. They were used as taxiways for a while, but they're not even suitable for taxiways anymore. But if we can remove that asphalt that's no longer usable, that can increase the amount of agricultural rent that we can get for lands at the airport. Because agricultural rental is one of the income sources at the airport. The programs that Conestoga runs at the airport, some of them would be better served in the city, and that would free up some hangar space at the airport that would allow us to bring in additional companies to be on the airport. There's one company that's currently considering a move to Brantford. They operate an air ambulance with fixed wing. Brantford Airport would be ideal for them in many ways, and they would be a wonderful long-term tenant that would bring additional assets to the airport. We've seen expansion in recent years with the individual hangars, the T hangars. We have a waiting list of 18 for additional T hangars. That's something we can build out with borrowed money. The rent from the hangars covers the cost of the debenture and any servicing costs on that, so they are self-sustaining financially. The airport is self-sustaining financially, both operating and capital. To suggest that we need to look at underserviced assets, the last time someone went after the airport, it led to the sale of Airedale Golf Course. So you need to be careful when you start pointing your fingers at certain assets without realizing that it might affect something else that's near and dear to your heart.
Thank you. Ms. McCallum.
So admittedly, I am not well versed in the situation with our airport. I think it's important that we consult with any stakeholders that may have interest in how a property is changed or developed before we make those changes. Mentioning Airedale, a wholehearted attempt to openly discuss plans instead of moving forward with plans and fighting people on them later will be a much more productive way for our council to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo, back to you.
I hope everyone here is familiar with the term the law of diminishing returns. It's one of the first things you're going to learn in economics. And it basically means continuing throwing the good money after bad. And that no matter how much money you throw at it, it'll never produce what it could in the form of something else. That's where we're at with the airport, in my opinion. And to prove that, I think we should let's find out what it's worth. Let's determine what its highest and best use is. Let's have the land, the buildings, and the equipment properly appraised, and then determine what we do with it. But 34 companies, bait packages, and 2 flight schools, even if you multiplied your revenue now by 100 times, you wouldn't come anywhere close to the potential of what that property can do. I hate to break it to the people that love it, and I can appreciate that they do, but it is no longer in the best interest of the community to leave it as it is. It needs to be unlocked in order to provide the citizens of this city with the flexibility to move forward. That's what the airport can do, if you allow it. You can pretend that it's going to pay off, but as all you'd be doing is pretending. It's not going to happen. It's best as something else, and it will benefit this entire community when that happens. And the sooner that happens, the better, because the longer we wait, the more difficult and more burden it puts on regular taxpayers. It is not the best use of that land, period.
Ms. Poisson.
First off, I want to state very clearly that I am not, do not, will not support the disposition of any public asset owned by the city that is used by the residents of this city. Yes, there are certain assets that perform or bring in more revenue than others, and those that are being underused or funded, maybe we do need to look at alternate options of how can we utilize that space in a better way. Can we provide an education campaign that we even are involved in the airports? Because many are not aware of that aspect. We have one air show. Why don't we have multiple? Why don't we bring in the community to the airports and showcase what it actually is about? Why don't we advocate more to bring in more businesses, business usage, schools, all of that to increase that revenue potential of the property. I am aware, like Greg mentioned, that if we do not utilize the property, it does then go back to the federal government ownership. I'll say that. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Yes, again, being new to this whole process, this is all a big learning curve for me. I will never profess to be well versed on something if I'm not. I have heard, however, that the airport itself is what they refer to as revenue neutral. I find it incredible that an asset of that value isn't making Brantford substantial incomes. To be the nice guy to allow some schools to be able to work there just fiscally is not reasonable. And that's all I'm going to say about this subject right now, because I cannot really speak to it very well.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary.
Paul, thank you. Well, if you're one of the 130 people that work at the airport, let me just say to you that your jobs are not on the line. This is not on the City of Brantford's agenda. This is a dog whistle item that's come up in this campaign to grab some attention for a number of candidates, okay? That's all this is about. If your kids go to W. Ross McDonald School, they're still going to be able to fly in and out of there every weekend. We're not taking that away. We're not going after blind kids to make a buck or two. And if I were a taxpayer and if I were a voter in this community, I'd be very concerned about what's next on certain people's agendas. What's next? The Wayne Gretzky Sports Center, we don't make money there either. Glenhurst Art Gallery, we don't make money there either. But what we do is we have an amalgam of initiatives and features in this community that make us what we are. The airport is instrumental in terms of economic development here. You can ask Sarah Monroe about that. That's how we sell a lot of our land, is by the fact that we've got airport access. Okay, yes, simply not on our agenda, and I find it quite remarkable that the same folks that took issue with the sale of Airedale Golf Course, and we have a couple of them here today, took issue with the sale of Airedale Golf Course, now think it's perfectly okay to go down the same road with the airport. I find that a bit ironic and a little bit troubling that, you know, maybe some folks will say and do anything to grab a bit of electoral attention during this campaign period.
I think I'll give you 30 seconds to rebut to that, Mr. St. Angelo.
With the several $100 million dog whistle, because that's what it is, Mr. McCreary, a several $100 million dog whistle. And obviously, you don't have the acumen to understand that. Full stop.
It's $1.
It'll never happen.
I will give Mr. McCreary a quick rebuttal, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Well, I guess I hit a nerve. You know, a little information is a very dangerous thing, as we see here today. Someone who's not well versed in what's going on, but's taking bad advice from other people in the community about what may get a little bit of attention. It's a very sad thing to see.
It's Mr. McCreary's chance to talk. Mr.
I
St.
believe
Angelo, Mr. St. Angelo, it is Mr. McCreary's chance to finish his statement. Please wrap up.
You know, I think that folks probably should invest the amount of time necessary to learn about these issues, to learn about what the corporation of the City of Brantford does, to learn about what the responsibilities and job duties of councillors are, because it involves looking out first and foremost for this community.
Thank you. We will move on. Residents and businesses in Brantford-Brant move between the city and county and other municipalities surrounding the city without consideration about the ownership of the roads or any borders. However, significant gaps remain in the roads and public transportation system to employment lands in our surrounding communities. Will you commit, as ward councillor, to developing a regional transportation master plan during our next term of council, working with our neighbors in Brant County, in Six Nations, and the province to plan for accessible transportation options, including improving GO and VIA service? And we will move on to Ms. McCallum for this question.
Thank you. And so I will definitely push for more comprehensive transit plans, not only with Six Nations and the county, but with all of our neighbors surrounding us in Brant, to ensure that anywhere we want to go, we have mass transit options available that are barrier-free and that are easily accessed from people within our community, especially as we're building new developments.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo.
For those that have come from other municipalities to Brantford, one of the first things you realize is that it can be a difficult place, A, to get to, and B, once you're there, to get around on public transit. And it's probably one of our larger obstacles to attracting new residents. I would support wholeheartedly any regional transportation initiative, including GO, because that's one of our biggest missing links is connectivity with GO. So I would support any regional transportation initiative of that nature, of course.
Thank you. Ms. Poisson.
I feel that transportation access between Guelph, Kitchener, Cambridge, and Brantford has been severely lacking for decades. I was a university student at the University of Guelph. I didn't drive at the time, and my ability to get home on weekends or holidays, I relied on a ride from my parents because it was not feasible to take the Greyhound or the GO bus to Mississauga and then back down to Brantford. It was almost a 5-hour trip one way, and tack on the cost of that trip as well. It was upwards, I think, of $50 for one way. And for a student, that's not in the budget a lot of times. So I am going to be a major advocate for that transit route through those municipalities because we need better transportation access for senior students, those that do not drive or rely on public transportation. The other aspect of regional routes is the connection of West Brant to the highway or other parts of the city. And I know it has been a very contentious issue just in the beginning stages of the Oak Park road extension. I do not support that access route. I won't support anything that drastically affects the Grand River or any of our environmental green spaces. But I do support alternate routes and cooperation with the Six Nations community as well as Brant County.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. I also would favor GO and train access, making sure that individuals that not only are students have an opportunity to get where they want to go or need to go. Personally, I don't choose to drive to Toronto, yet I enjoy visiting the city very much and I utilize what we currently have. If that isn't an option for everyone in the immediate vicinity, then we should definitely be looking at bringing that aboard for everyone. Also, with the Oak Park Road extension, I feel the same. We mustn't go over the river. We must keep that clean and pristine. We've already hurt a lot of the environment out in that area. That was where I grew up as a child. The wildlife is basically going to be non-existent in short order. There was a turtle pond there, which is now a drainage area for the new subdivision. The wildlife corridor that was left certainly was not large enough to allow the beauty to remain and the wildlife to remain, in my opinion. The bridge also would go over sacred lands and burial grounds. And although we're told that this was in the plan long, long ago, nobody that purchased their plots for their loved ones were ever advised of these plans at the time of purchase. If that were the case, I'm sure they would have found alternative locations, I believe, to have their loved ones laid to rest. And indeed, we have to work with the County of Brant to get all of this done.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary.
Paul, thank you. Well, years ago, we squandered the opportunity put before us to be able to build through the glebe lands. There was a sum of money paid to Six Nations for that right, and the time period lapsed. So what would have been probably the most expeditious route to connect West Brantford with North Brantford is now lost to us, and we've sold off the lands that we owned along the way. So that's off the table. The Oak Park Road extension, Made a lot of sense to a lot of people at the time, but for reasons previous speaker indicated, that's off our table for consideration now as well because of some archaeological concerns, some ecological concerns, and you know, to put it quite bluntly, you can't be tone deaf when folks tell you that they want to be able to enjoy the serenity of communing with their loved ones in the cemetery. So, you know, for many reasons that came off the table. So now what we're faced with is the opportunity to simply enlarge upon what we've got. So you'll see an increase in road width on Paris Road to come. You'll see it on Gretzky Parkway. You'll see it on Park Road North. You'll see it on West Street. And we do have to fathom out a way to connect the dead end of Gretzky with Highway 24, and that remains to be a bit problematic. So to come back to the question with respect to our regional and neighboring partners, there was a time when we were engaged with the County of Brant looking at shared services. Councillor Chambers and I put together that committee these many years ago, which has gone a little bit off the rails. We looked at a number of things. We talked about the emergency services folks. We shared them. We already shared, of course, social services, but animal services is still on the table for us. But it'd be nice if we could come back to the table with County of Brant in particular and talk about our joint transportation planning and our joint planning initiatives with respect to land use and making our neighborhoods contiguous rather than abutting. So I would look forward to that initiative in the coming term of council, and hopefully the county folks will be amenable to that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. The whole idea of a regional transportation plan is very appropriate. We've already taken the first step in getting Go Bus to Brantford. It's like I say, it's a first step. Ideally, we would have Go Trains, but we have to prove that there is demand by utilizing the Go Buses initially. We also need north-south connections to Cambridge onto Guelph, and those are badly needed. We need a Go service that goes that way as well, and that's something that the province needs to do. And something that would help with that too is if we could get the 424 built eventually, because that would be a very important piece of north-south infrastructure for transportation that would be utilized by buses as well as cars and trucks. The idea of a regional bus service is one that we're going to have to take a serious look at. One of the problems with transit is we only cover 1/3 of the cost of transit with the fare box. So that might be something that's on the table once the money from the airport runs out. But in order to expand our bus service into the county and to Six Nations, first of all, we need the province to make some changes to the rules. We had to get a special exemption just to run buses to the airport for the air show. So there has to be some changes to the rules that will allow the transportation system within Brantford to cross borders into the county and into Six Nations. Once we get that in place, then there's the discussion of funding the extended routes and who's going to cover the extra cost for that extension. And that's something that will be a hard nut for the county and the First Nations people to deal with. But it's something that would be wonderful if we can accomplish it. And that's something that we'll definitely be looking at in the future. Whether we can be successful in negotiating something for that remains to be seen.
Thank you. Greg.
The city's economic development portfolio, as we've discussed, is quite diverse. It includes more than just the traditional commercial and industrial sectors. Arts, culture, heritage, and tourism are all sectors that are economic drivers. What will you do to enhance the city's commitment to arts, culture, heritage, and tourism?
And we'll begin with Mr. St. Angelo.
Thanks for that. Arts and culture has long been known as an economic driver, and you don't have to look too far to see other municipalities utilize arts and culture. Just to give you an example, the city of Burlington at one time had a downtown that was struggling immensely. It was run down, not a lot of activity, and this is going back maybe 25 years ago. And they started something in the city called the Sound of Music Festival. They closed the streets, and it was a 3-day-long music extravaganza. And now today it's one of the most popular music festivals in the province. That is a very clear strategy that works. Find the areas of your city that you want to grow. In this case, it was Burlington's objective to revitalize downtown. And that was the very first step, the Sound of Music Festival, in doing that. And if you go to downtown Burlington today, it looks immensely different than it did when that first started. It is a completely different environment. And it all is attributed back to the beginning of the Sound of Music Festival. And from there, it just grew and grew and grew. Now it's arts, it's children's things, and it's a regular activity that's done seasonally in Burlington. We have those same opportunities here. And in fact, Brantford is a blank slate. We have the ability to create anything we want as long as we have the vision and the skill to execute it. So the downtown core is the perfect opportunity for arts and culture enhancement, and it should be part of whatever it is the vision ends up being for downtown. That needs to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brisson.
I feel over the last several years to potentially even the decades, we've lost our way a little bit when it comes to prioritizing and putting thought and effort into protecting our arts and culture and history of the city, because I wasn't a big political person up until a few years ago, but the more I did my research and paid attention, the more interested I was in the actual history of this city. We need to do a better job at protecting it, at advocating for it, as far as bringing festivals and art crawls and just even murals to the downtown or other parts of the city to provide that aspect to the community and allow people to love their city again. We see communities like Cambridge and Kitchener and Guelph, even Hamilton, prioritize that aspect within the city. So I feel that we need to really drive to bring our city up to par with the surrounding communities, because we are severely lacking in those aspects, I feel, at this point in time.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Well, this is something near and dear to my heart. I was raised by in a family that was very much involved in productions and attending Stratford, for example. I was fortunate enough to see The King and I live with Yul Brynner at a very young age. And my mother was also involved in Theatre Brantford for years and years and years. I find it disappointing that we haven't taken any of that and really ran with it. It adds such a different dimension to an individual's upbringing and the enjoyment of the city. Love the idea of shutting down some streets and creating great music venues, and we definitely could grow by utilizing some of those ideas. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCreary.
Paul, thank you. Well, the Jazz Festival certainly is something that we've seen significant success with in the downtown. It's been missing the last couple of years because of COVID, but I think we saw that happened maybe 10 or 12 years, and it brought in a lot of folks from out of town, and it closed the streets downtown. We've had the same thing with the car show down there. So there have been a lot of events that we've done, and I agree with Mr. St. Angelo that we really need to find a signature event for this community that can begin to attract people from away and make that what Brantford's about. We do have a number of initiatives underway currently. We've got the Cultural Hub, which is currently in the planning stages at the old Eaton Market Square owned by the university. That's going to become the center for, I think, the 30 or so amateur theater organizations in town. So there'll be a home there for those people. There'll be an opportunity for them to have a professional venue to reach out to the community and show what good things we do have here in Brantford. We've also made some strides with respect to heritage in this community. There was a time when Councillor Martin and I, possibly we were the only heritage advocates on council, And now we've broadened that, and the highlight, I think, probably of the decade is the fact that we were able to save the little cottage from Chatham Street and made the developer pay to relocate that to a new home. And also on our agenda for the coming term of council is the initiative regarding our consolidated museum space. So we have buy-in from council to explore the opportunity to consolidate some of the really fine collections that we have in the city of Brantford under one roof or on one property, as well as to be able to consolidate things like maybe a relocated farmer's market, some theater space, some performance space, to create the kind of a venue that really will allow the kinds of things that we'd all like to see happen in the city happen here. And I would encourage, people in the room today to continue to be involved or get involved in arts and culture in this city and make that kind of contribution.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. To listen to some of the people in this panel, you'd think that we're a desert for arts and culture. But when you look at Harmony Square, the jazz festival that Councillor McCurry mentioned is only one of many festivals that occur on that site. And many of them are big enough that it closes down the streets on either side and expands into the streets. We subsidize Glenhurst, which is an amazing facility there with the beautiful gardens and the art collection within the home there. The Sanderson Center is an amazing performance space. You talk to any performer who performed there, they love it because the acoustics of that building is amazing, because it was designed into the building when it was built, because it was built before amplification. So you could be on that stage and be heard at the back of the theater if you speak loud enough or if you play your instruments loud enough. And artists love that. The acoustics of that building is phenomenal. We need to capitalize on that a little more and promote more concerts there. As far as museums, the War Museum we have in Brantford is kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's been called the second best war museum in Canada, second only to the one in Ottawa. So it's a fantastic museum. If you haven't been there, be sure to get down and check it out, because it's got some amazing artifacts and amazing displays there. And we recently set out a program to encourage people to apply to paint murals on one of the former train bridges over the river. And unfortunately, some keyboard warriors attacked it. Oh, you just want some free talent. Well, we're trying to promote talent within the city, promote local artists by allowing them to put murals on this pedestrian bridge that will be seen by lots of people that cross there. So there is lots going on in the city, despite what some members might lead you to believe.
Ms. Poisson, would you care to rebut?
I will severely disagree with that. Yes, there are some aspects of culture and arts and festivals that happen in the city, but nowhere near what we need and require and are being asked for by the residents of the city. You see countless people, particularly of my age, come to the city or visit the city, and then they have nothing to do. They have nowhere to go, or have any sort of activities to partake in.
Thank you. And over to you, Ms. McCallum.
There's been a lot of good conversation about arts and culture, and looking at what Burlington's done, fantastic things. Spencer Smith Park is always quite busy. The pandemic slowed that down, but just about any weekend in the summer when there's fair weather, you can expect to be stopped for a long time on Lakeshore Road trying to get anywhere. And after those events close, with the foot traffic coming away from the park, if you're parked in the area and trying to leave, it's a very difficult situation. And also, poses danger putting the traffic and the active transit together. So as we look to, try and have more large-scale events, we need to make sure we're putting them in the right places, making sure that they're easy to access for people coming in from out of town, and that they have, resources to the amenities that could keep them in town maybe for a weekend instead of just an afternoon. But further to that, we really, if we want more arts and culture, we need more diversity. And as we grow, we need to find ways to have Brantford be an inclusive, welcoming place for people. I think there's been some sort of division sown a little bit in the way that some of our council has operated, in the things they've found the time to share and spread on social media when they're not using that sort of regularly as a platform to communicate with people. And I think that having councillors in place who are looking to be more inclusive are going to help us grow the city in a much stronger way, especially when it comes to arts and culture.
Thank you. We'll move on. The City of Brantford, as we've talked about a number of times, is nearly a $250 million corporation. And as councillor on this council, you would hold a very unique voice amongst 11 officials leading this corporation. Tell us about yourself. What makes you uniquely qualified and the best person for the job? And why do you want to be a city councillor? And we'll start with you, Ms. Poisson.
What makes me the best candidate to represent the constituents and the city moving forward? Many of you know, but some of you may not. I'm the active sitting president for the Friends of Airedale nonprofit organization. I've been an active member for nearly 3 years now, and I have dealt with the financial donation aspect of it, as well as prioritizing those donations to be best utilized under time constraints and pressures financially as well as socially. When it comes to advocating for this city, I feel like we need a fresh face. We need a new perspective. People are asking for change. I feel like I can provide that due to being a younger generation. I'm also female. I have a different progressive perspective versus what we have been seeing sitting on council for a number of years. And the people are asking for it. So we need to give them something different. And I feel that with the active budget that we currently have in our hands, it's just not being used responsibly. And I feel that there is significant improvements that we can do to it to prioritize spending and expenditures and have our city moving in the right direction again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Harrison.
Yes, as I indicated, my 39-year career was in the financial industry. When you're working for the big banks, you need to work within certain budget constraints and make sure that you don't overrun them. Shareholders demand accountability, and they also like their dividends. So there's that. And then I also was a director of a horse club for youth for over a decade. There was a very large horse club, and I handled not only just the finances. In fact, I didn't really want to do that. I was more comfortable out in the ring, helping the youth get their horses ready and keep their horses calm. But eventually, of course, it was Kimmy in the booth. There were 5 horse shows a year, and balancing those horse shows, of course, was imperative. So I'm very careful with other people's money, always accountable and transparent. You must be able to show what is being done with the money that you are collecting. And I'm sure that we can have a lot of cost savings in Brantford, especially with consultation fees and that sort of thing. We hire many people with many skill sets for the city. Many of them are also on the sunshine list. I'm sure they have the skills, or in a lot of cases, some skills that we can use in lieu of sourcing out. I feel that I want to continue helping the city move forward in a positive manner and yet fiscally responsibly. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary.
Paul, thank you. 18 or 19 years experience on council. Prior to that, I was very involved in the community, serving on a lot of committees. And prior to that, wrote an article for the newspaper I think it was a Monday, when council was on Mondays, describing what goes on at city council. If I were a voter, I would make sure that I wanted to talk to every single one of the folks in this room, ask them what they've done for the community, ask them about their community involvement, ask them, whether they participated in not-for-profits, whether they're involved in doing good things. Ask them if they've been the member, if they've been in charge of a third-party organization, if they've managed to ever get around to publishing a financial statement for that organization. That might be something I'd like to learn about. And if any of you are former presidents or current presidents of third parties, that might be something that you could share with all the candidates and the newspaper, for instance. So these are the questions I think that the electors should be asking about. Ask about the breadth of knowledge, ask about community commitment, and ask about character.
Thank you. Ms. Poisson, rebuttal.
Rebutting that, because it's quite clear that that comment was directed towards me and the Friends of Airedale. I want to make it very clear that it is not a governmental requirement for the nonprofit that we established to display financials publicly. We are a business, we are not a charity in that aspect, and that is the clear division between the two. It is also quite clear, it was a David versus Goliath process as well.
We'll wrap it up there. Moving on to Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Until recently, I managed multiple income properties owned by members of my family. And as a council member, one of the things that I did was I dove into the line by line. And in my first term on council, that's when I found out that there was an expenditure item on the books for maintaining parking meters. The parking meters had been removed from the downtown for years. And when I questioned that expense, the answer I got from staff was, oh, well, we still need to do some work on the meters in storage. When I tried to cut the line, I couldn't even get a seconder. And my first term was marked a lot by, actually I got the nickname as the lone opposer, because I tried to cut waste from the budget and a lot of times couldn't get a seconder. That all changed when Councillor McCreary was elected. Then we started losing votes 9 to Martin and McCreary. One of the things I found in the line by line, the engineer of the day, Alf Gretzinger, tried to hire, I think it was 8 or 9 additional people without bringing them through the unmet needs process. He tried to claim that he was returning to his complement because what had happened is we'd contracted out operations at the landfill, so he lost 9 employees there. He tried to bring in 9 additional employees without going through the proper process. So I found that and we put an end to that. We did a program review, and I was chair for that operation. And with one organization, after about the 5th or 6th time when I asked about a line expenditure that had never been spent, they said, well, that's a placeholder. And I commented, so what you mean by that is you're padding the budget. And they get a little uneasy with that. And one of the members of one of the councillors on the committee said, well, the chairman's views don't reflect the views of the committee. And clearly that was true. I was looking for savings in the budget, and other members of council were not. So it's unfortunate in that respect. So the people of Ward 3 need to elect somebody who's going to look after their interest in going through the budget in detail, finding the waste, and getting it out.
Thank you. Ms. McCallum, why do you want to be a councillor?
Well, really, when you get down to it, I want to help people. I worked downtown doing personal taxes for years and interacting on a one-on-one basis with people, talking about income, talking about struggles, seeing the disparities. That drives me to want to help, to find solutions to some of those issues. What I think it is, it's my willingness to put myself in someone else's shoes. It's being in a place where, I really do sort of represent the median of our city, and I represent what our city is trying to do as far as growth and bringing people in. Having lived throughout the province and internationally as well, you know, I've got a little bit of a different perspective on how things are done other places and what we can do differently. And instead of, you know, harping on how we've always done things, I'm going to be looking for ways for us to move forward and find more equitable solutions for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo?
Yes. My background is marketing and advertising and brand strategy, and for the last 14 years, I've run my own executive search firm, and I basically work in the marketing and advertising field. While working in the advertising field, we would be managing budgets in excess of millions of dollars, which is nothing that is new or foreign to me. One of my strengths, however, is finding opportunity, and that's one of the reasons that people hire my firm, is to find opportunity. And it might be opportunity that no one knows is there, like our airport. There is a general feeling in the community that those running it have lost touch with the community. The example that was given to me at the door is the coach of a hockey team that's been there far too long, and the team suddenly just over time tunes them out. That was the example given to me. What the city needs is fresh perspective, fresh eyes, and fresh blood in order to turn the page on the past and move forward. And that's why I want to be here, to help turn the page on the past and move the city forward in a meaningful way. Thanks.
Thank you. We have time for one final question. Greg?
Candidates, final question of the day. The City of Brantford's success is closely tied to the success of our neighbors in the County of Brant and increasingly Six Nations of the Grand River. We share boundaries and land use opportunities with both, and in 2017, brought close to 1,700 net hectares of land into the city's boundaries. What are two key and substantive areas of services that you believe could be improved upon by partnering with our neighbors in the county and/or Six Nations, and how can the city improve those relationships?
And we'll start with you, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. I feel very strongly about the fact that the city in the past, especially recent past, has not honored our commitments to Six Nations. There is a Six Nations agreement in place already, and yet during the potential sale of Airedale, they were not notified. Well, they were, but 2 days after the sale was supposedly completed. This is not the way to create good relations, especially at a time when that community is mourning the loss of their loved ones at the residential school. We cannot stop recognizing that they count, they matter, and they're our closest neighbors. We have to stop alienating that community. That's first and foremost. As far as Brant County goes, I'd like to see communications improved and working relationships improved with them as well. They do hold a key with the SPCA, for example. Again, something near and dear to my heart. I believe in the protection of animals, not just domestic, also wildlife. And yet, here we are, how many years later, after having been given a piece of property, still nothing is up and running for us, for both communities. So that's definitely two things that I'd like to see improved upon when I get to council.
Thank you. Mr. McCreary on shared services.
Paul, thank you. Well, as I said earlier, Councillor Chambers from the county and I initiated the Shared Services Review Committee these many years ago. We've had some accomplishments, namely from that came the annex of county lands, which I participated in as one of the city's negotiators. There's a lot of opportunity for us. The one opportunity that I've always seen down the road is a regional police system. The county currently employs OPP. We currently have a pretty darn good policing service, which certainly could encompass the county's needs as well. And I'd like to see that on our table for some discussion during the term of this council. Much of what happens, city, county, First Nations, it's about personality, it's about getting along, it's about developing rapport and trust. And there are a number of us on both councils, I believe, city and county, that have that rapport and trust, and we could certainly get back on track. There was a brief mention about SPCA, and we are in the process of talking to county about blending our two animal services departments. That hopefully will happen during the next fiscal year. But you know, the other opportunities for county and city, as we touched on earlier, transportation, planning. There's nothing that the two communities do that we can't do better as a team. And I think back to when we first got started on the annexation committee with Mayor Friel and Mayor Eddy and some councillors from both sides. One of the terms that we coined early on was to consider that the city and county should be sharing a partnership in prosperity. And that's the future for us, to make sure that we both enjoy that. Six Nations as well, they're a little distant from us. They're a community away, but certainly city, county, we've got a long way to go and a lot to accomplish to make both communities more coherent, more cohesive, and more affordable for our constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. One of the projects I believe is being worked on is dispatch for the fire department in the county. That can be handled by the city. We already have dedicated dispatch at the city. They can take on the county. It was done years ago. I remember when my father was a Brantford firefighter, one of the things that they did was when they did the radio checks, they checked the radios to all the halls in the county as well, because Brantford did the dispatch. That was lost somewhere along the way, and we're looking at reviving that. One of the things to come out of the boundary line negotiations was that the city and the county cooperate in both the Cairnsville area and in the lands around the airport. And that's something that can benefit both communities when we get together and work together on seeing mutually beneficial development go on in those areas. And one of the things that the county does very well with First Nations is a lot of their solar energy projects. And that's something that's been lacking at the city of Brantford, and that's something that I think we need to explore, is getting involved with those two communities on any future solar projects so that we can benefit from the greening of our environment through solar. And we're not really a strong wind resource here, but definitely solar, and we can look at some hydroelectric on the river as well. There's a few areas where the low-head dams can be utilized to generate electricity. So it's something that we can work together with the county and First Nations people on, and hopefully build stronger connections and ties and help all communities benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKellum.
So what Mr. Martin touched on there with the sort of the administration of the fire services and the dispatch idea, I think we can look at that and try and expand it, not just with those neighbors, but look at other localities that we can try and absorb some of those administrative duties from as ways to help them be more efficient and also help cover our costs in administering these programs. The other thing, looking at emergency dispatch, it's looking at who are we dispatching for what calls. I think we're weighing down our police services a lot of the time with calls that, maybe they're not the best people to respond to. Maybe we're putting things on their shoulders we shouldn't be. When it comes to calls with people in distress, mental health, people who are suffering and unhoused, and people are seeing them as an eyesore in the community and calling to have our police services and bylaw push them along. I think we have the opportunity to try and look forward to how we can work better with the people in our community and, offer better resources and services instead of, putting things on the shoulders of our officers that shouldn't be there. Anything we can do to work with Six Nations in an upfront and clear way to try and work towards, some, instead of the illusion of inclusion and consultation and reconciliation, actually work towards it and lead the way. We are very close to the largest most populated reserve in the country, and I think that we should probably take the first step.
Thank you. Mr. St. Angelo.
Thanks. Every level of, of government will tell you that money is tight. So any opportunity that we have to share services and enhance the quality of those services is something that we should be doing naturally. Earlier today, the province made an announcement of a new initiative. It's with First Nations to enhance economic growth in Ontario. And the purpose is for municipalities and the bands to try and work together, and they'll support, to do big things. And this, in my opinion, actually sets the tone for what we could do with the airport, along with Six Nations in the county of Brant. It is actually the perfect opportunity to do such a thing and build something that the rest of the country would be envious of, along with Six Nations and the county. That's the kind of opportunity I see for that area, to build a strategy to service 3 local airports, create economic activity as partners, and start as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. And lastly, with you, Ms. Purcell.
I just want to publicly express my disappointment with our relationships with not only Brant County, but the Ongwehoe community as well. The city over the last few years has implemented strategies in order to gain revenue, one of it being the non-resident user fees, which severely affects the Brant County as well as Six Nations communities. They are charged extra fees to use our public facilities, whereas if your address is in the Brantford border, you don't have those fees. So I feel that we need to do a better job to actually resolve and mend and build our relationships with the communities that we do surround. We are surrounded by. Secondly, I feel that we are. I can't even express the disappointment that I have with the actions and relationship that the city of Brantford has taken with the original title holders of this land and territory. Brantford sits directly in the middle of the Haldeman Tract, which is currently under federal land claims. And we need to work with respect and admiration of where we call our home. So that is very important to me as well.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions today. The candidates will now make their closing remarks, and I remind all the candidates that you will be allowed 1 minute for your closing remarks, and we'll be proceeding in reverse order of our opening statements, which means, Greg Martin, you are up first.
Thank you. I thought we had 2 minutes, but
1 minute.
okay. In 18 years of serving as your Ward 3 councillors, I've worked on your behalf to make positive changes to the policies and obligations of your local government and navigate to reduce or freeze property tax increases and expenses. This priority continues to be important, but long-term issues must also be a priority of our city. So we need to balance well-managed growth of residential, commercial, and industrial needs will be critical in years to come if we are to expand our opportunities as a city. With the Municipal Act of Ontario continuing to limit control how we grow as a community, we need to find and implement ways to keep spending in line at City Hall and develop new ways to generate revenue for the city that will help offset potential tax increases. This work will need to be done during a time of community growth that sees increases in operating and capital costs as we deal with the development of the new boundary lands and the costs of maintaining or building our infrastructure needs. We also need to be aware of how national and international political and economic uncertainty affect the citizens of Brantford.
Thank you. Dan McCreary.
Thank you. Thank you for that, too. Let me just start out with the last message I want to leave you during this 2-hour Fun Fest. And I would like to ask you to go to the polls on October 24th and send me back to look after your interests for the next 4 years. I think as a viewer, you're probably asking yourself today, whose interests do all these folks represent? What are they all about? And why are they throwing stones at folks with 2 decades of experience when they have none? So I would encourage you to examine not the platforms of each of us, because I think what's more important is to look to the character, to look to the reason why people are here today, and ask yourself who you want to represent you for 4 years at the City of Brantford Council table and in your neighborhoods looking after your bread and butter issues. And I think the answers are pretty clear. We need strong, sensible leadership for the road ahead. We've got some difficult decisions to make, and I'm not sure we need the types of representation that we've seen. Thank you.
Kim Harrison.
In closing, I would just like to reiterate that although I am new to this endeavor, I approach it with an open mind, an open heart, and the desire to do what is best for the citizens of the City of Brantford and the residents of Ward 3. I am quick to learn, and I bring a skill set that I don't believe has been on council in the past. The business of running a city must include people at the table that are unwavering in their commitment to help those in need and to better our community. A cost-cutting approach with regards to all the wasted spending is imperative in my opinion, and I propose to do just that. As Mr. McCreary indicated, all the voters need to get out and meet these candidates and ask them very specific questions and find out if they're the individual that you want representing you. This Sunday offers an opportunity to do just that. There is an event being held at Yates Castle. Please look it up.
Thank you. Kaylee Poisson.
I'll start off by saying I appreciate the topic of Airedale coming up a number of times tonight because it is a grave concern to the community that we are supposed to represent. And it is one of the things that I personally feel was mishandled grossly. And a lot of community members and citizens are crying and asking what's going to be next. The way that that was handled, what is going to be next? So that is a big reason why I'm stepping up. I feel that we can do better and we need to do better. I envision what the City of Brantford could be. If you cast a vote for me, I'll fight to get us there. Restore your voice on council. Be heard. Vote on October 24th. Educate yourself and do the research, because your vote matters.
Thank you. Mark St. Angelo.
Thank you. There are people here today that confuse experience with acumen and don't want you to believe that your city is capable of big things. Have you ever heard the expression, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got? It rings true during this election simply because elections are about outcomes. Voters have a choice to make. Do you continue to empower those who have driven your taxes higher and doubled your housing wait list and its associated costs while our downtown core continues to falter? Do you continue to empower those that can't or won't recognize hundreds of millions of dollars in economic opportunity for Brantford by determining the highest and best use for the Brantford Municipal Airport? I ask you to think very, very long and hard about the decision you have to make, and I hope you're prepared to turn the page on the past and get excited about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Francis McCallum.
So we need to find ways to move forward together to strengthen our sense of community and strengthen our sense of civic responsibility. We need to get ourselves and our neighbors out to vote. Our declining voting rates in Brantford, especially in our municipal elections, have been very disappointing. Less than 40% of eligible voters got out in 2018. I'm hoping that we can see that change by offering more options, by offering a vision forward instead of constantly looking behind us at the way we've always done things. Trying to find ways to encourage the members of our community to make their properties more sustainable, to help reduce the strain on our city's infrastructure as we move forward. Finding ways to ensure our new builds are taking advantage of gray water and water collection to reduce our needs for further development.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again to all our candidates for sharing your thoughts with us this evening and for your continued commitment to our community. I'm sure that today's discussion will be extremely valuable and greatly assist the residents of Brantford in making a very important decision on October 24th. Thank you to Rogers TV for partnering with us in producing this community program and for providing the Chamber of Commerce an opportunity to get the residents and the business community information on the people running for candidates in Ward 3. All of the City of Brantford municipal election debates will air a number of times on Rogers TV Brantford until the election day, and will also be available to view online on Rogers TV and the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant YouTube channels. Thank you so much for joining us. Please exercise your right to vote online beginning October 3rd at 10 a.m., in advance polls on October 12th through 15th, or on October 24th from 10 a.m. till 8 p.m. in person. And join Rogers TV for election night coverage. Thank you and good night.